Billions, she never expected my return. Rhett Cole was 36 years old when his wife looked at him across a restaurant parking lot on a Thursday night in October and decided, out loud, in front of 4 people who had known him for years, that he was not enough. He had come up short on $140. A group collection for a friend's birthday dinner. Fallon had asked him that morning, and he had told her he would check the account. He checked it. He came up short by a number that was not dramatic, not catastrophic, not the kind of shortage that defines a life. He told her that evening before they left the house. Quietly. In the kitchen. The way a man tells his wife a small and manageable truth that he expects her to receive as a small and manageable truth. She did not receive it that way. The parking lot was lit by a single overhead lamp that buzzed faintly and turned everything yellow. Their friend stood near 2 separate cars. Brielle had her arms crossed against the cold. The other 2, a couple named Jace and Petra who had been coming to dinners like this for 3 years, stood very still, in the way people stand when they are hoping not to be noticed by what is happening near them. Fallon did not lower her voice. She said he had been promising things for 4 years. She said every time she looked at their life, she saw a ceiling nobody else in their circle had to live under. She said she had watched her friends' husbands get promoted, start businesses, build something with direction and intention, and what had Rhett built? She let the question sit in the cold air without answering it. Then she said the line he would carry for the rest of his life. You don't fail loudly, Rhett. You just make everyone around you slowly lower their expectations. She said it cleanly. Without heat. The way someone says a thing they have been rehearsing quietly for months and have finally decided to release. Jace looked at the ground. Petra looked somewhere else entirely. Brielle stood very still and said nothing because there was nothing left in the air to say. Rhett did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He looked at Fallon with the kind of attention a man pays when he is storing something rather than responding to it, and when she finished, he said nothing at all. He put his hands in his jacket pockets. He looked at the pavement for a moment. Then he walked to their car and waited for her to get in. What Fallon did not know, standing in that yellow light, telling her husband what he was and was not, was that Rhett had already made a decision 8 months earlier that had nothing to do with her opinion of him. He had made it in a different parking lot, outside a building in Midtown Manhattan, after a conversation that had changed the direction of everything quietly, completely, and without announcement. She did not know about that conversation. He had not told her. Not because he was hiding it, but because he had learned, slowly and through careful observation over 4 years of marriage, that Fallon received unfinished things the same way she received failed things. Without patience. Without the capacity to let something grow in the dark before deciding what it was worth. So he had said nothing. He had kept working. And what he was building was already further along than she would have believed possible, which was precisely why he had never described it to her. Before we go any further, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you are watching from. And if you are new here, subscribe now. Tomorrow's story is one you will not want to miss. That night, Rhett sat alone in the parking lot of the Hampton Inn 7 minutes from their house. He had not gone back inside after Fallon walked upstairs. He had stood in the kitchen for a while, not thinking, not planning, just standing in the particular silence of a room that has recently held a conversation it will not recover from. He looked at the cups still in the drying rack. The dish towel folded over the oven handle. A grocery list on the counter in Fallon's handwriting from 3 days ago. The ordinary evidence of a life proceeding as though nothing had changed. He picked up his kit bag from the hall closet and walked out without leaving a note. He drove to the Hampton Inn without deciding to drive there. He sat in the parking lot with the engine off and the windows fogging slowly at the edges, and felt the particular quality of a Thursday night in October in a parking lot 7 minutes from the house he had just left. He sat there for a long time without going in. He was not rehearsing arguments. He was not building a case. He was doing what he had always done in the space between one thing ending and another beginning, measuring. Taking stock of what the structure still had in it. What load it could still carry. What had held and what had not. He looked at his left hand on the steering wheel. He took off his wedding ring. He held it for a moment, not with ceremony, not with grief, just with the quiet attention of a man setting something down that has served its purpose. He placed it in the center console. He got out of the car. He checked into the room. He lay on top of the covers in the dark and stared at the ceiling, and felt not devastated, not relieved, but the particular stillness of a man who has finally stopped waiting for something to become undeniable. It had become undeniable. Now he could work. Rhett had been on the floor at Hadwell, a Manhattan fashion label with a reputation for clean lines and difficult creative directors, for 6 years when Willa Hadwell first noticed him. Not in the way people imagined later, when the story became something worth telling. She noticed him the way a builder notices another builder. She had come down to the floor on a Tuesday in February to look at a problem with a sample run that her production coordinator had failed to solve in 3 days. Rhett solved it in 40 minutes, using a method that was not in any handbook she had written, because she had not thought to write it. She watched him from the doorway. She said nothing. She went back upstairs and sent her assistant a single line. Find out everything about the man on the floor in the grey jacket. Willa Hadwell was 61 years old, had built the label from a single loft in Tribeca 22 years earlier, and possessed the particular quality of powerful people who have nothing left to prove. She trusted her eye above everything else. Her eye had made her. It had also cost her 2 marriages and 1 friendship she still thought about on certain evenings. Her eye said Rhett Cole was not a floor man. She began inviting him to fittings, then to production meetings, then to conversations over coffee in her 14th floor office that her staff noted and did not comment on. She asked him questions about construction, proportion, what he saw when he looked at a garment versus what the designer intended. He answered without performing. He told her when he disagreed and explained why, clearly, without softening it. He never said what he thought she wanted to hear. That was the rarest quality she encountered in any room she walked into. She asked him once what he would do differently if the label were his. He told her. She listened for 40 minutes without interrupting. When he finished, she set her coffee cup down and looked at him the way she looked at a sample that had come back from the workshop better than the original sketch. How long would you need, she said. 14 months, he said. To do it properly. What would you need from me? Backing. 2 introductions. And the freedom to fail without it being held against me. The third one I cannot give you, she said. If you fail, it will be held against you, that is the reality of the room you want to enter. The first 2 I can do. He nodded. He said he understood. Then let's begin, she said. She introduced him to a real estate contact in Brooklyn with a raw space in Red Hook sitting empty. She connected him to a fabric sourcing network built over a decade. She brought in a production manager named Olin Marsh, retired early, bored, and willing to work on a deferred fee. Rhett named the label Aaron. He did not explain the name to anyone who asked. He said only that it meant what it meant to him, and that was enough. The 14 months that followed were not a story of triumph building steadily toward an obvious conclusion. They were quieter than that. And harder. There were weeks in the 5th month where the cash was close enough to the edge that Rhett stopped drawing a salary and said nothing about it to anyone. He ate from the same 4 places in rotation, places where he knew the prices before he looked at the menu. He worked 7 days. He slept 5 hours. He said nothing about any of it, because it was not a problem that required talking. It was a problem that required holding a line until the line moved forward. There was a production run scrapped entirely in month 8, patterns wrong from the first cut, compounded across every piece. Olin found it on a Thursday afternoon and brought it to Rhett without softening the news. Rhett looked at the table for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "How long to restart clean?" Olin said 10 days. Rhett said start tonight. December came. Rhett ate Christmas dinner alone at a table in the Red Hook space, a container of soup from the place 2 blocks over, a jacket draped over the chair beside him that he had just finished and had no one to show yet. He had been invited to 3 different gatherings. He declined them all, not from self-pity, but because the collection was not finished and he did not have the kind of hours to spare that celebration required. He looked at the jacket on the chair for a long time. He thought about the parking lot. He thought about Fallon's line. Then he put on another pot of coffee and went back to the cutting table. He thought about her line often, during those months, not obsessively, not with sustained pain, but the way a splinter surfaces when you press on the wrong spot. Everyone around you slowly lowering their expectations. He had turned it over many times. Examined it from different angles, the way he examined a construction problem, looking for where the logic held and where it failed. The truth was, she had not been entirely wrong about what she saw. She had seen a man coming up short on $140, working a floor job for 6 years with no visible upward movement, no nameplate, no announcement of what he was doing or where he was going. She had simply had no framework for a man who built things quietly, correctly, without needing anyone to watch. He would look at what was laid out on the red hook cutting table at midnight, the patterns, the samples, the work accumulating in the dark, and feel something that was the precise opposite of what she had named. Not the slow lowering of expectations. The slow raising of a structure that no one could see yet, because it was not finished. Then he would go back to work. 3 weeks into the new year, on a Monday morning in January, Rhett sat on the floor of the red hook space with his back against the cutting table and did not move for a long time. He had been awake for 31 hours. A sourcing problem had collapsed a key fabric order, the supplier had folded without warning, and the alternatives Olin had found were not right, not structurally, and Rhett knew the difference well enough that he could not pretend otherwise. The collection was for months from the showcase. He had 8 pieces he could stand behind. He needed 22. He sat on the concrete floor and looked at the space around him, the hanging samples, the half-finished work, the notebook full of solutions to problems he had already solved, and felt, for the first time since Hampton Inn, the specific weight of not knowing if the ground would hold. He sat there for 40 minutes. He did not call anyone. He did not write anything down. Then he stood up. He found the notebook. He opened it to a blank page and wrote the names of 3 fabric suppliers in a different region he had not yet approached. He picked up his phone and left the first voicemail at 7:45 in the morning. The 3rd supplier called back by noon. The order was placed by Thursday. He did not write that part down. He did not need to. Willa came to the red hook space in month 12 and stood in front of a coat for a long time. Double-faced wool. A color that was not quite gray, not quite green. She touched the construction at the shoulder. She looked at the interior finish. "That is what I am trying to understand how to make happen consistently," he said. "You already understand it," she said. "This piece proves it. The question now is whether you trust what you know." He looked at the coat. "I'm working on that," he said. She nodded once and left. He stood with the coat for another hour, then went back to the cutting table. Meanwhile, 2 months into Rhett's build, Fallon had met Sterling Voss. She encountered him at a corporate event and came home changed in the way people change when they believe they have found a reflection of what they deserve. Sterling wore clothes that suggested money the way a stage set suggests a real room. He spoke about investments and opportunities with the practiced fluency of someone who had studied the vocabulary without doing the underlying work. She and Rhett had one conversation about it. 20 minutes. She said they had grown in different directions. He said he understood. She waited for more, and when more did not come, she transferred what remained in their joint account and closed the door behind her. Rhett had an attorney send 1 letter. The money came back within the week. He filed it and moved on. 6 months into the build, a mutual friend mentioned Fallon's name at a dinner Rhett attended briefly before leaving early to get back to the workspace. She and Sterling were doing well, the friend said. Traveling. Sterling had a new deal in the works. Rhett nodded and said nothing. He drove back to Red Hook and worked until 2 in the morning on a collar construction that had been giving him trouble for a week. He solved it around 1:30. He wrote down the solution in the notebook he kept by the cutting table and did not think about the dinner conversation again, A year into the build, on a Tuesday evening in November, Fallon saw a photograph. It appeared in a trade publication she sometimes flipped through at her salon, a small feature on emerging Brooklyn labels worth watching. One image, a rack of garments in what looked like a raw concrete space. A coat in the center of the frame. Double-faced wool. A color she could not name exactly, somewhere between gray and green, with a quality that stopped her before she understood why. The label on the rack was too small to read clearly. She looked at the coat for a long time. She felt something she could not fully name, an instinct, an aesthetic recognition, the pull of a thing made exactly right. She turned the page. She forgot about it within the hour. She did not look up the label. The name Aaron would not land for another 6 months. The first Aaron showcase was held in the Red Hook space on a Thursday evening in December, 14 months and 3 days after Willa had asked him how long he would need. 60 invited guests. Raw concrete walls. A single runway of reclaimed wood. Every seat chosen deliberately. Willa sat in the third row. She did not want her presence up front to become the story. The coat came out 7th in the lineup. 2 people stopped mid-conversation the moment it moved into the light. Rhett watched that from the back of the room and felt something settle in him. The specific, unmistakable feeling of a structure bearing the weight it was built to carry. Willa started the applause. She found him afterward in the hallway and said 4 words. "You did it right." "Thank you for the introduction," he said. "I introduced you to rooms," she said. "You built what's in them." A New York buyer placed an order that night. A London department store made contact the next morning. Aaron moved to Dumbo, 3 floors, a full production room. A luxury distribution partnership followed, expanding into 12 international markets without requiring Rhett to hand over a single thing that mattered. He signed the agreement on a Monday morning on Park Avenue and drove back to Brooklyn in the same used car he had been driving the night Fallon told him he had no ceiling. He had not replaced the car. The car was a car. What it carried had nothing to do with what it was. The Aaron flagship showroom opened in the West Village on a Tuesday in early spring, 2.5 years after Red Hook. While all of that was building, Fallon's life had been quietly contracting. Sterling Voss's venture collapsed the way things built on performance always do, not loudly, not all at once, but in stages, each one smaller and quieter than the last. The account Fallon had moved the joint funds into went with it. The lifestyle went with it. The version of herself she had been carefully constructing since the parking lot went with it in a way that was harder to name and harder to recover from than the money. She moved twice in 8 months. First to a smaller apartment in a neighborhood she had previously described as a compromise. Then to a smaller one still, 3rd floor, no elevator, a window that faced a brick wall. She had a job she was competent at and a life that looked from the outside more or less complete, but that had a quality of reduction she felt in specific, quiet moments. At dinner tables where she calculated before ordering. In the way she had begun measuring rooms before she walked into them, sizing up the ceiling before she sat down. She thought about the parking lot. Not constantly, but it surfaced the way things surface when they have not been fully resolved. She had been so certain when she said it. The clean relief of a woman finally saying a true thing out loud. But the true thing had started to shift, looking different depending on the light, depending on what the week had cost. She had not looked him up. She told herself it was dignity. Possibly it was something else. Then, for months before the showroom, Brielle sent her a link. It was a profile piece in a style magazine. Half a page, modest photograph, a showroom interior in warm light, white oak floors, garments spaced with a deliberate generosity. The label name in clean letters above the rack. Aaron. The piece called it a quiet revolution in American construction. It described a designer who had appeared from nowhere, built something in Brooklyn with the precision of someone who had been preparing for years, and produced a coat in the first collection that buyers were still reordering in the 3rd year. Fallon read the piece twice. She looked at the photograph for a long time, the garments, the floor, the specific quality of the space. Something in her registered it the way she had registered the image in the salon 6 months earlier, without knowing why. "Beautiful," she texted back to Brielle. "Genuinely. We should go." She did not connect the name to anything. She did not look up who founded it. She did not read past the piece. She had no reason to. The Aran flagship showroom was on a street in the West Village. Ground floor. White oak floors. High ceilings. Garment spaced generously, each piece given enough room to be seen fully. The kind of space that communicated, without a single sign, that what was inside had been made with patience, with intention, with a respect for the person who would eventually wear it. Noelle ran the floor, 24, former Soho retail, the kind of person who treated every customer identically regardless of what they arrived wearing. Rhett had hired her on the basis of a single interview answer. On a Wednesday afternoon in April, Brielle walked in first. She moved slowly through the space, the way people move when they are genuinely responding to something rather than performing the act of shopping. She found the coat. Grey-green double-faced wool, third production run, still selling because certain pieces keep selling when they land on something real. She lifted it from the rail. She held it. She did not put it down. She called Fallon. Fallon arrived 20 minutes later. She walked into the Aran showroom beside Brielle and felt the air of the place before she had formed a single thought about it. The kind of air that exists in rooms where the things inside them were made by someone who cared completely. She moved through the space slowly. She stopped at a jacket in cognac leather, precise, architectural, and felt the construction at the shoulder the way you feel something when it has been built correctly. She noted the price. She moved on. She found a coat. Charcoal cashmere. A collar that sat exactly right, in a way she could not have described technically, but felt the moment she touched it. She put it on. She stood in front of the mirror at the far end of the room and looked at herself wearing something that fit the way things fit when they are made with patience rather than speed. "That's the one," Brielle said, quietly, from beside her. Fallon said nothing. She looked at herself and saw, briefly, a version of herself from somewhere earlier, before the ceiling she had spent for years measuring became the thing she thought about most. She brought the coat to the register. Noelle folded it carefully in tissue paper. She quoted the total. She waited. The card was declined. The machine made a small, specific sound. Noelle's expression did not move. She asked, in a voice carrying nothing beyond simple practicality, whether Fallon would like to try another card. Fallon tried another. The machine made the same sound. Fallon looked at the counter for a moment without speaking. She said she was sorry, she would need to come back. Noelle said of course. She began, carefully, to unwrap the tissue. Brielle looked at the floor. A door at the back of the showroom opened. Rhett walked out from the back, the way he came out most afternoons, because he believed the person who builds a thing should be in the room with it regularly. He was wearing a jacket from the first year. Dark navy. Clean lines. The kind of piece that does not announce itself, and does not need to. He saw them before they saw him. He saw Brielle first. She looked up at precisely the same moment, and her face did something immediate and complex that she controlled before it finished forming. He looked at Fallon. She was looking at the tissue being unwrapped on the counter. She had not looked up. He walked to the register. He said good afternoon to Brielle, by name, because Brielle had always been decent to him, and introduced himself to her as the owner of the space. He said it without looking at Fallon while he said it, without any additional weight attached. Brielle took his hand and held it 1/2 second longer than a standard handshake, with the expression of a woman who had been waiting a long time for something to land where it deserved to land. Fallon looked up. What followed had no dramatic sound to it. No gasp. No speech. It was a woman looking at a man she had dismissed in a parking lot on a Thursday night in October, standing in the room he had built, wearing a jacket he had made, being introduced to her closest friend as the person who owned everything surrounding them. The recognition did not come all at once. That was the part she would not be able to explain to anyone later. First, she registered the face. The stillness of it. The way he looked at her without adjusting his expression, without performing anything, without giving her a single cue about what she was supposed to feel. Then, she registered the space around him. The white oak floor. The garment spaced with a precision that communicated something. The quality of the light. Then, the coat on the counter. In tissue paper. Her coat. The one the machine had declined twice. Then, very slowly, the way a structure settles into its foundation rather than collapses all at once, the name above the door she had walked through without reading. Aaron. The magazine. The profile Brielle had sent. The coat in the photograph that had stopped her before she understood why. The space she had called beautiful. Genuinely. The label she had not thought to look into further because she had no reason to. She had been admiring it for months. Without knowing. She had walked through the door of it, without reading the name, without being invited, without anything to prepare her, and brought a coat to a register in a room he owned, in a building he controlled, and offered a card that failed in front of a woman he employed. She had been standing inside what he built before she knew he built it. That was what broke her. Not the confrontation, because there was no confrontation. Not the gloating, because there was none. Not his expression, because his expression had not changed. What broke her was the absence of all of it. He looked at the coat in Noelle's hands, and told Noelle to put it on the house account. Noelle looked at him. He nodded once. She folded the coat back into the tissue with the same deliberate care. She placed it in the bag. He told Brielle it was genuinely good to see her. He nodded once to Fallon, the nod you give a customer you have served and have no further business with. Then he turned and walked back through the showroom, past the outerwear in its third run, past the work of the second and third collections, and through the door at the back that led to the workshop, the production room, and everything else he had built in the silence she had called comfortable. The door closed quietly behind him. Noelle handed Fallon the bag with both hands and smiled, the way someone smiles when they work for a person they respect and have just watched him be exactly who he is. Fallon took the bag. She and Brielle walked out onto the street. The April air came in off the river 2 blocks west. They stood on the sidewalk and said nothing for a long moment. Then Brielle said, quietly, not unkindly, he always knew. Fallon did not answer. She stood there with the bag in both hands. Not ready to walk. Not ready to speak. Just standing in the April air outside the room that had just told her everything she had spent 2.5 years not knowing. She held the bag and looked at the window of the showroom. At the word Aaron, in clean, small letters on the glass. At the garments visible through it, all built by the same hands that had come up short on $140. She thought about the parking lot. The lamp that buzzed. The specific words she had used, and how she had arranged them, and who had been standing there listening. Without moving. She thought about Jace looking at the ground. About Petra looking somewhere else. About what it meant that the people closest to the moment could not look at her while she was inside it. She thought about the line she had delivered so cleanly. You don't fail loudly, Rhett. You just make everyone around you slowly lower their expectations. She had believed it completely when she said it. She had been so certain. Standing on that sidewalk now, holding a bag containing a coat that a man who owed her nothing had paid for without ceremony, without comment, without a single backward glance, she understood that she had been reading him wrong from the beginning. All of it. The quiet. The patience. The face that stored things rather than performed them. She had called it emptiness. It had never been emptiness. The cruelest thing she had ever done was mistake his silence for nothing. And the most honest thing the afternoon had given her, the thing she would carry the longest, was this: he had not become great to answer her. He had not built Aaron to prove a point, or to arrange this moment, or to watch a card decline in a room he owned. He had simply never stopped building. She had walked into the evidence of it, without being invited, without knowing, without anything to prepare her, and the room had told her the truth the way rooms built by certain people always do. Quietly. Completely. Without raising its voice. Willer attended the third Aaron Annual Showcase the following October. 3 major publications reviewed the collection in the weeks that followed. All 3 used the word architecture. Willer mentioned this to Rhett over coffee the morning after the last review, in her 14th floor office, the same view, the same quiet. He looked different in it now. Not in the obvious ways. But there was a quality to the way he sat in the chair that had not been there 3 years ago, settled, like a building that has passed its first winter and knows it is going to stand. He said architecture was the only word that had ever made sense to him for what he was trying to do. She asked if he was happy. He looked at the question the way he looked at all questions that deserved a real answer. He said he was doing the work he was built to do, in a room he had built to do it in, with people around him who were there because they were excellent, not because they needed something from him. Most evenings he drove home and felt the specific quiet of a man who has nothing left to perform for anyone. "I think that's it," he said. "I think that's the whole thing." Willer looked out the window at the city below, at all the buildings someone had built because they believed the structure would hold before anyone else could see it. "Your grandmother would have understood that," she said. "She built things too," he said. "I know," she said. "That is precisely how I knew about you." They sat in the quiet of 2 people who had each built something real, and understood, without discussing it, what that had cost and what it had returned. Outside, the city moved the way it always moved, making room for nothing except what insisted on existing. Rhett's car was in the garage downstairs. Same engine. Same slight pull to the left at highway speed. He would drive home this evening, eat at the table in the Carroll Gardens apartment with the high ceilings and the west-facing window, and work for 2 hours on a construction problem in the spring collection. Then he would sleep without difficulty. He was not a man who needed to be told what he had built. She had called him a failure in front of everyone. Years later, he did not answer her. He simply let the room tell the truth. If this story landed somewhere real for you, leave a like, and tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Subscribe so you are here when the next one drops. It is already waiting for you.